So once again, my name is Scott Matthew from California DECA. I am the state officer leadership coach. And so I get to work with state officers all year long, which is awesome. Again, it is super cool to see so many of you on this call with us to learn a little bit more about what it could take to be a California DECA state officer. And so I'm excited for you all to embark on this new leadership journey. And so the first thing I have to say is thanks for being awesome. That's what I have to say, because someone that says, hey, I'm interested in this. There's this new opportunity of like, man, it would be a state officer, a leadership position. Like, what is that about? Like, maybe I think I'll find out more. Or whether that was an invitation from your advisor or from a friend, or you just personally feeling like maybe I could do this. That's awesome. And it says a lot about you. And so I want you to know that right off the bat that, before we get into the next few months of what the candidacy looks like and the selection process and all of that kind of stuff, I want you to know that even though there's only 6 positions on the state officer team, that does not mean there are only 6 leaders across all of California DECA, right? Leadership is more than a position. It's action. It's a mindset. It's how you go about and interact. And so all of you are starting to show leadership potential right now, which is super cool. So good job for that. I know, you can say that's fun to say, Scott, but let's talk details about being a state officer, which I agree. Okay, so we'll get into that. But I'm excited to be a part of that. So we have some great representatives from all over the great state of California, which is awesome. And so I am in this meeting is to go over the candidate guide, basically the candidate guide, because that has all of the key information that you need to know about the positions, the qualifications, and the process of our state officer team and the entire state officer program. Okay, so that's what we're going to take a look at this evening. And even though this is being recorded and everyone watching in the recording, if you're here in person and you have questions as I go, feel free to throw those in the chat. And then a member of our state officer team or myself will be able to help answer those. But I'll make sure all of that's verbal for the recording as well, so we can all have this good information. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to reinforce with everyone is the importance of the candidate guide. Okay, so the candidate guide can be accessed on California DECA's website. That is something that is available for everyone. You head to californiadeca.org. You click on the officers tab up in the right-hand corner, and then you can click on candidate, and that can take you to where you need to go. So let me just walk you through this quickly, just so we can all be on the same page here. When you are headed to californiadeca.org, as you can see, maybe, there we go. As you can see on my screen, then you head over to officers over here on the right-hand side, and then be able to do candidates along the top row there. So that is what you can look at as you scroll down. There's going to be some other information that we'll talk about, but that top PDF document is the candidate guide. And so that's what we got to look at. So you want to make sure that you have that bookmarked, that you have that available, that you have it saved, that kind of thing, just so you can make sure you are always referring to the right information. Okay. So that is a piece. And so like I said, want to just go through this quickly, just to kind of summarize some things. We're going to talk about what the different positions are. Because sometimes I realize that not always are the positions super clear for everyone to understand, like what's the difference and that kind of thing. So we're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about the qualifications and the due dates of the process. That's going to be mainly of what we focus on. I know there can be a lot of questions about like, hey, what will it look like when I'm campaigning? What will be the rules, especially this year, because we are, we're working in a socially distanced world and in this environment. So there's going to be a lot of questions about that, but those answers will come more later than right now, just because first we want to get you through the process to be an approved candidate. And then we'll make sure that you are prepared ahead of the campaigning and anything like that to make sure you feel comfortable. Okay, so that's kind of the quick outline of what I'm going to try and cover with you all this evening. And so let's get started here with our candidate guide. Okay, so the first thing that I'll show as I scroll through the table of contents and this nice letter from your great state director, Bryson Woodley, is first obtaining support from your local chapter. Okay, this is an important thing that is often kind of just an assumed thing. It's like, well, duh, Scott. But this is an important piece. There is an optional form on that candidate page that I was showing you earlier that your advisor can fill out. It's not required, but it just kind of lets us know of like, hey, your advisor saying like, hey, from our chapter, we have these 2 candidates or this one candidate that's interested. Nothing official about that. There's no due date for that, but just as an option. But this one, the candidate notification form, that one is required. okay? What that form is, again, it's linked on that candidate page, but that's a form that your advisor has to fill out, okay? So keyword, your advisor, not you. And your advisor says, hey, California DECA, I have this one or these two awesome chapter members that I am giving my thumbs up to be a candidate or to be considered as a candidate for California DECA. And that's important to us as the state team because we want active chapter members. We want chapter members that are out there contributing, that have good relationships with their local advisor, that have the trust of their school administration, because there's a lot of ownership that the state officers have to have and a lot of trust that they have to have. And so that's kind of, consider it like a letter of recommendation almost from your school to say, yep, we give this person a thumbs up. So it's a super quick form. It's not hard for the advisor to fill out. It's just one that you got to make sure that they do. Okay. So that one is a piece there. Then there's some information for the advisors just to be mindful of as they help you throughout this process. Okay, but let me focus in on this one a little bit because this is one that you've got to make sure that you have clear with your advisor before you move too far into the process. Okay, and that is our career and technical education course requirement. All right, so here's what this means. So DECA, as it says on this top line, and I'm not going to read this whole thing, but DECA is a co-curricular career and technical education program for emerging leaders and entrepreneurs, but it's chartered by the California Department of Education. And so that's a key piece there. The Department of Education, meaning like across the state Department of Education for California, helps fund California DECA. And in meaning creating all of these awesome opportunities for us, the resources, the competition, being a part of DECA Inc. and all of that good stuff. And so the California Department of Education kind of says, okay, we're going to help support for all of this to happen, but we want to make sure that the schools are doing a few key things to make sure that students are getting the maximum of their experience of being a DECA member. So what that means is they have to have, there's CTE courses, and that's where we have to fall in. And so here's what that looks like. To be considered as an approved candidate, you have to either be currently taking or have previously successfully passed or completed a CTE course to be eligible for candidacy. Okay, so that means there are some approved CTE course requirements. And this is something that if you have any questions about, please talk to your advisor. Because there's different school, each school has kind of their own CTE courses. They're not all the exact same across the entire state. So that's why your advisor is a better resource than I am for that. But you'll want to talk to your advisor about like, okay, what class am I in or have I already taken that satisfies the CTE requirement? And then once you have that figured out, it's like, okay, cool. Like I have taken it or I am taking it and I'll pass it so that I'm good there. Check. I have that requirement. Great. But then there's one more step for this, and that is that while that you are enrolled in a CTE course during the entire duration of your term, if you are selected as a state officer. Okay, so that means like once you're selected, right, we get into the spring, you're taking a CTE course, but then next school year, when you are an officer, right, for that like all the way from August through March or whatever the school start and end dates are, that you're taking a CTE course. The entire time while you're a state officer, you have to be in a CTE course. And then you have to pass those, obviously. But that is super important. And the reason that I have to like slow down and really call that out is because this, over the last few years, the requirement has always been around, but it's one that all schools are still trying to make sure that they are getting up to the point where they're meeting. And so that's why there may be some DECA chapters out there that hopefully you've got this covered. But some of you might need a little bit of extra help of like, hey, talk with your advisor, talk about what these courses are, which ones can be approved by the California Department of Education as CTE courses so that when you're taking those, you're good to go. And I can tell you that will be part of this process. The application process is you'll submit a transcript where you will specifically highlight of like which class do you and your advisor see as checking the box for the CTE course that you have taken or are currently taking to qualify you as a candidate. We take those transcripts and we send them off to the Department of Education for them to validate. So it's not even like a me thing. It's not even in my hands. I take all those transcripts, pass them on, and then they come back and tell us, okay, here's your list of approved candidates. So it's just super important that you talk to your advisor about that. You'll want to know that you and your advisor have a plan for what class you're currently in or have taken, so you can check that box. And then what classes will you take if you're selected as an officer, so you can make sure that you maintain that requirement there. Okay. So hopefully that I explained that clearly enough, but there's information there in the candidate packet as I was showing. And again, please talk to your advisor. And if your advisor has questions, obviously they can reach out to us at the state team. They can reach out to the state director, and we can totally help clarify anything in regards to that requirement. Okay, so super important. I got to slow down and make sure we're all on the same page there. And again, if there's questions about that, please feel free. But again, talk to your advisor. Your advisors can reach in here. I'm sorry. Okay. So now as we scroll through, so is running for state office right for me? There's some great pieces, and I'm going to get some involvement here from our state officers. But when you think about is it right for me to be a state officer? The first thing that I want you to understand, even before we dive into all of the positions and what each position means, is that all of them are student leadership positions. All of them have great weight and credibility on your resume, on your college applications. Some of them, they just each have their own different focus. And so is it right for me? Well, I'll ask you this. Are you someone that wants to help make DECA better? Are you someone that wants to not just succeed for yourself, but you enjoy creating opportunities and seeing others take advantage of opportunities so that they can thrive too? Are you someone that's ambitious and that you want to excel and you want to have good things to say about your college application and that kind of thing? Great. If you say yes to any of those, man, you're on the right track. But let me yield really quick to our state officer team. Any of you can jump in and speak up here. But what advice would you give of is being a state officer right for me? What questions would you encourage them to ask themselves? Any of you can jump in here. Help me out.
I think a good question you can ask yourself is whether you'd be able to dedicate enough time and effort into this position if you feel like you're personally able to and ready for it. I want to say that pretty much anyone can be a state officer. You don't need to be extraordinarily talented or anything. You just need to be able to put in the work, put in the effort, and just be committed to your position.
Very cool. Thank you, Gavin. Any other comments?
I think you should also ask yourself, if you're a people person as well, talking to other people, if that makes you comfortable. Because you are going to be talking to a lot of people with this position. So you should be comfortable, presenting and having good public speaking skills.
For sure. Very cool. Good advice, Ramya. Any others?
Ask yourself if you think you have sufficient DECA experience so that you're able to answer any questions that may come up. In this position, you're not only going to have to work on projects that impact everyone, but you're going to have to communicate with any members who might come up with questions to ask you. So ask yourself if you've seen enough of DECA so that you know how to address those questions.
Very cool. Super well said by all of you. Appreciate that. Good thoughts. Good thoughts. And so when you think about it, if you're here, right, I say, man, you're on the right track. And we already kind of talked about that a little bit. But that is something that I want all of you to think about. And if any of you have any other thoughts, throw those in the chat as we keep going. Or if you have any questions, feel free to type those in as well. But now let me keep rolling through our guide here. And let's talk a little bit more about the specific positions on the state officer team. Okay. So we have two different types of positions, and it's important to understand the types because they follow a little bit different processes depending on the type. Okay. So first you have your elected offices. Okay. So that is, and you can see them listed here, your state president and then your district vice presidents. These are all elected positions, meaning the membership of California DECA casts votes, and that's how those positions are selected. And so there are some interviews, there's some application process, all of that good stuff to make sure that you're qualified. But then California DECA, as a state team, as a board of directors, they pass off and say, okay, at your district competition conference, right? They would say, here's your approved candidates, vote. And then each chapter is able to send some voting delegates, they vote. And then we check out who our winner is. At SCDC is when that president race happens. And again, the same thing. The board of directors says, here's your approved candidates, vote. And so then it's in your hands as members, which is super cool. But that's one piece, and we'll talk about the timelines for those because, like I said, it's a little bit different depending on the position. And then the others are appointed positions. You see that listed here. On that one, the following that's the vice president of marketing and the vice president of leadership. Okay. And so those are what's called appointed, meaning they aren't up for election, meaning the membership of California DECA is not voting for these candidates. Instead, they're appointed by an interview committee. Okay. And so what that looks like is they go through kind of the pre-screening process, just like all the other candidates, like the elected ones. But then instead of going and campaigning for votes, they go into an interview process and are interviewed by a panel. And then the decisions are made by that panel. And then the announcements are made and all that good stuff. So there's either an elected office, meaning you're elected by the membership of California DECA, or there's appointed where you're chosen by an interview committee. Okay. But then when you talk about what those positions are, like what's their role, right? And that's what we can dive into a little bit here. And so let's see, as I get to this spot, before we jump into the specifics, we're gonna like go around and each state officer can just give us a 2-sentence summary of their position of like, what do you work on, right? But while they're kind of waiting to come up with that, let me just share a few keys that are like responsibilities for all officers. Okay, so no matter what position you have, you do some of these things. And I won't go through every single line, but just call out some of the highlights here. So first, we have meetings. We meet regularly as an officer team. And even before 2020, these always happened virtually because we're from all over the state, right? And so we meet regularly. And so it's expected that state officers all attend those meetings. And so that's an important piece. There's a thing called the program of leadership. And that is essentially as a state officer team, your goals and initiatives for the year. And we plan those out and then you start working on it. And it's expected that you all, like as state officers, put out your work, like get your stuff done. What due dates did you give yourself? Make it happen, right? Like put out the great resources, talk to the chapters, anything like that. So there's all of that good stuff. You can see there's some other pieces on there about being with social media, communication, keeping that updated. There's monthly reports that you fill out. Just being a good representative of California DECA, right? Helping recruit, supporting chapters, chapter advisors, supporting the chapter officers, especially as a state officer. That's super important. And then here's one that I'll also call out. As a state officer, you can't just disappear from your local chapter either. You still got to be a good member there, go to meetings, all that kind of stuff. If your advisor ever talks to me as the coach and is like, yeah, I haven't seen him much, then I'm like, hey, that's a problem. So that's another piece. You'll do chapter visits. This year, we've had to do a lot of those virtually, right? For obvious reasons, but some that could be in person next year, depending on how everything happens. But that's kind of the overall gist of everyone. Okay, you're all helping support chapter officers. You're all supporting chapters. You're all helping with social media, helping carry out things and that kind of stuff. So let's dive into just some quick summaries of each of these positions. So let's start with our great state president, Amory. Got anything to add for us?
Yeah. Hi, guys. I'm Amory, and I'm your state president. My role is probably the most fluid out of all of them. I'm not only in charge of my own projects, specifically regarding President's Council, which meets once a month. I also have to manage the state officers and help them with their projects. For example, I get involved in whatever any of the officers needs from me. And in addition to that, I report monthly to the board of directors. So I take everyone's progress from that month and sum it up in a report and then talk to Bryson as well as some of your advisors. So that happens on the 10th of every month. I think that's more or less it. In a normal year, I would also attend a lot of industry events on behalf of California DECA. That includes speaking at things like educational fairs, as well as local networking events for business organizations such as NABO, National Association of Women Business Owners. So that stuff is on hold because of the pandemic, but that's also something that would happen in a normal year. If you do decide to run for state president, it is a pretty big commitment, and it's hard for me to say what you can expect because in reality, you just take whatever is put in front of you and work with it. So be ready to do that if you're running for president.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amory. And I'll just echo that where you think about as the state president, it's kind of like being a CEO of a company. Like you don't have like a ton of direct things that you do all the time. It's just making sure everything is working. And so it's like, how you doing over here, state officers? Ooh, do you need help over here? Like you're just keeping things rolling, keeping things moving. And it takes a lot. It's not just as easy as here's a checklist of what you do, like some of the other positions could be. And it's more of just checking in on all that kind of stuff. And so Emery's done a great job, and I can't wait to see the legacy that she leaves for whoever comes in next. But Emery, let's do one more quick thing. Just share what chapter you're from, and then all of the others officers will do that when they introduce themselves.
I am from Lynbrook DECA in Silicon Valley.
Very cool. Thank you, Amory. All right. We'll keep rolling. Let's so we have our district presidents. Okay. And so let's talk about those positions a little bit. So each of these district positions also has what we call a mission-based area. So overall, the district presidents, you can see that their role is to serve the chapter officers, especially the chapter presidents in their district. Okay. And so I'll kind of preview like what they do as district presidents, and then I'll let each of them introduce themselves and they can share about their mission-based area. So overall, they're trying to create strong relationships in their district, kind of help network and bridge resources across that district, any of the 3 districts. And they also have a huge role in planning the district career development conference. And so that's a big part of that role, is where they're trying to, yes, build a good community in their district and be the main host of the district career development conference. So they want to look at the President's Council, like Emery shared. They want to get all of their district presidents there, or representatives of those chapters. They're just trying to communicate within the districts. It's kind of like that's their mini statewide association, right? The state president is kind of over the whole state, all 5,000 plus members. These district vice presidents are kind of like, all right, here's my SoCal district, or here's my Silicon Valley district, or my Northern California district. And here they try to focus to make it the best they can. And so with that, let's turn some time over to our district vice presidents, and they can share a little bit about their mission-based area along with what chapter they're from. So let's see, let's start from the bottom and work our way up. So Gavin, take it away.
All right, I'm Gavin. I'm from MLK DECA, and I'm in SoCal, so obviously I'm the VP of SoCal. My mission area is career development. So as a VP of SoCal, as Scott explained, like I'm in charge of the Southern California district. So that means that I'll be working with the SoCal District Conference. I reach out to all the SoCal districts. I work with them. For example, I know Daniel's been working on a project lately that I've been helping him with. He asked me any questions when he has any questions about like conferences or procedures or anything that's going on. And then as the VP of career development, so that basically means I'm in charge of like prep materials competition for California DECA as a whole. So for example, I just posted a fundraising video about like last week, and then like Champ Camp, which happens every year. So you can look out for those things. But yeah, that's basically what I do.
Very cool. Thank you, Gavin. Appreciate it. Let's see. Let's head up to Silicon Valley. Take it away, Tyler.
Hey guys, I'm Tyler. So I'm the VP of Silicon Valley, and my mission-based area is the VP of Finance. I'm from Mission San Jose DECA in the Silicon Valley district, and pretty much as the VP of SV, your goal is to try to lead the district and try to improve everything that's going on there. So I know that's kind of vague, so I kind of focus more on my mission-based position now. So as the VP of Finance, I'm primarily involved in different community and philanthropic initiatives. So for instance, the Business Pitch Challenge recently that was held a week or 2 ago, I was involved in the execution of that. And yeah, so that's some of my initiatives. And other initiatives I can pursue include things such as education and pretty much anything that tries to help improve the overall experience of just the California DECA community.
Very cool. Well said. Thank you, Tyler. Let's see. Now we'll work our way up north. Aditi, take it away.
Hi, I'm Aditi from Amador Valley DECA, and I serve as the Vice President of NorCal. As Scott said, I overlook the creation of the NorCal District Conference, and I serve as the President of the NorCal District Action Team, which is a district team that only NorCal has as of right now. As VP of Hospitality for the state office team, I work with the other state officers to carry out my initiatives to improve communication and the overall experience within California DECA.
Very cool. Thank you, Adithi. And so you can see that each of those district vice presidents, they have an extra job and how that works. Well, let me explain how that works. After all of the officers are selected, we have our 3 district vice presidents, and then we kind of hold like just kind of getting to know them, and they kind of venture of like, hey, here's the mission areas I think I have ideas for, what I think would be best. And then I actually collaborate with the state president. So like this year, Amory and I connected, and we're like, okay, like, what are you feeling? How do you think? Like, how do you want to lead your team, right? And we let that state president kind of make the proposition. And then as a state team, we approve it to say, great, yep, assign those district vice presidents that additional mission area, and then away they go. And so that is an awesome piece, but that's not all. We have 2 other great members of our team. And so we have the vice president of marketing and the vice president of leadership. And so let's talk a little bit about those positions there. So we'll start here on the next one with our candidate guide, the vice president of marketing. And so Ramya, you want to share a little bit about your position?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ramya. I'm from Irvington DECA, and I serve as the Vice President of Marketing. So part of my job is basically just to create promotional material for California DECA and post on our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook on behalf of our organization. And a lot of this position just requires you to be able to like create graphics and create and like just know what's happening in the DECA world so that you're able to post on social media and like keep the members updated on what's happening.
Very cool. Super important position there with Vice President of Marketing. Got to make sure the word's getting out about all the awesome stuff. Very cool. Thank you, Ramya. Let's see. And then last but definitely not least, we'll hear about our Vice President of Leadership position. Jake, take it away.
Hi, guys. I'm Jake. I'm from MLK DECA like Gavin in Southern California. And although the title is called the Vice President of Leadership, it's not just really about leadership. Basically, what my position is kind of making initiatives that are going to help acknowledge the non-competitive aspects of the DECA experience besides just competing at actual conferences. So this includes initiatives that focus on acknowledging chapters for their things they're doing to engage their members and stay involved in the community. Community service events like the community service events that take place at the district conferences each year. Working to curate content with Ramya, like the being a state officer video that we just posted a few days ago. So it's a pretty fluid position. It's pretty all-encompassing, but it leaves you a lot of room to come up with creative ways to keep members engaged and focusing not just on competition, but all that DECA brings.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you, Jake. You know, when you think about each of these mission areas, each one of them operates as a leader. Each one of them interacts with chapter presidents, with each other as a state officer team, or other chapter members across the state in helping lead them towards opportunities that DECA has. And so each and every position is a leadership position. I know vice president of leadership is often kind of like, ooh, that must be really cool, right? Because it's a vice president of leadership. And I mean, Jake's a super cool guy, but all of those positions are operating as leaders. And so I just want that to be said of like each one on your resume or on your college application, they all look good. Okay. And so just so you can have that peace of mind, I guess, if that's what you're really looking for. And so it's more just thinking about what ideas and value do you feel like you would bring the most based on what position, right? And so just to quickly summarize, you have kind of all these mission areas, and each one has such a vital role with California DECA's success. We've had a great climb of growth. I kind of slipped in earlier, like California DECA, we are well over 5,000 members now, which is awesome. And we want to keep that rolling and be able to continue growing and having a strong presence of California DECA across all of DECA. And so that is done by our state officer team. And so each of those positions is something that we focus on in trying to be able to make a big deal for all of you. Okay. And so again, if you have questions about those positions, feel free to throw those into the chat. You're also welcome and encouraged to reach out to any of these state officers at any time and be like, hey, I know you said that while Scott was there, but tell me the real deal. And they can tell you more about their positions. Okay. So let me jump back into our candidate packet here and let's talk more about eligibility. Okay. So right off the bat, you can see there's, again, we got to make sure you're in good standing in the eyes of DECA and in the eyes of your school, right? So that's why we have that approval from your chapter to say, yep, they're good. They're a good representative of our chapter. Like we're all good there. Leadership experience is great if you've had a leadership role at your local chapter level, not required. Like you don't get thrown out if you haven't held a position at your chapter, but definitely encouraged. Then you look at GPA levels. Okay, a candidate must have earned a GPA of 2.5 or better, and then you got to maintain that every semester. So yes, you have to have a cumulative GPA of 2.5 to be qualified as a candidate. But then once if you're selected as a member of the team, you have to maintain that too. So all of a sudden, if your grades just drop while you're in office, you're going to be removed from office because you're falling below that level. So just make sure you check on your own and you set your own goals for that to make sure you can meet that requirement. The CTE course, I already talked about that, about those requirements. So seniors, if you are a current senior and you're headed up towards graduation at the end of the spring, you aren't eligible, sorry. But for the rest of you, yes. Okay, so you just can't be graduated and be a member of the California DECA State Officer Team. And so that's what that piece will look like. Right after the state conference, right there at SCDC is when you begin your term, and then that closes at SCDC when the new team begins their term. So that's kind of the timeline as you think about like, how long am I a state officer, right? That's what that would look like. And then you look at just the eligibility. Do not make our job too easy in removing candidates. And what I mean by that is kind of like in competition, right? Like if you're late for a DECA competition, if you don't do any of the key indicators, the performance indicators, it just makes it easy for like 0, you're out kind of thing. That same thing is true when it comes to the candidacy. When we look at like, okay, was everything submitted on time? If it wasn't, it's just easy. It's just, nope, see ya. You know, you're just not able to move forward in the process. So it's so important that you don't wait till the last second. It's so important that you just take action now. I mean, you think about it, there's 19 of us, so I guess a dozen taking away our state officers, and there's only 6 positions. And so even right now, we can't take everybody. And so you just have to make sure you don't make the job too easy to remove yourself from candidacy. You've got to turn everything in on time. The last thing on that eligibility list is about chapters. Each chapter can only have 2 candidates from their chapter. You can't have more. And we're just trying to spread the representation of the state officer team across the entire state. So that's why it's only 2. And that's why it's also like they got to be different positions too. So we're trying to look at just balance there. And so you can see like last year, MLK DECA had 2 candidates in Gavin and Jake, and both of them made it on the team. So there you go. But so it's just a good mix between, you know, SoCal officers and NorCal, the SV, like the different districts. We try to just keep it spread so there's good representation, right? So that's another thing that we look at there. Okay, so now I will get into the specifics about the application as we kind of wrap up. This is my last segment of this evening with you all. And so as we talk about this, coming back to the candidate guide, again, I already mentioned this intent to run form, not required, but just a paid piece of the application if you wanted to. The candidate information session, here you are right now. So look at that, there you go. But now we get to the DECA knowledge exam, okay? The knowledge exam is it's a DECA knowledge test. Like it's literally a test on DECA knowledge, okay? So I know, like, don't get confused. It's about DECA, specifically about California DECA. On the website, on the officer page, there is a study guide that you can look at that's been updated. It's ready to roll. So you can reference that. And then there's the knowledge test. Okay. How you take the test it's pretty easy. You just have to tell your advisor, you got to say, hey, local chapter advisor, I need you to send an email to coach@californiadeca.org. I need you to say, hey, I'm ready to help my candidates take the knowledge test. Send me the details. And then we will. Okay. And so really, like, that's as simply put as I can make it. Is your chapter officer just needs to email us at coach@californiadeca.org, and then we will be able to walk you through that. You do have to take that, and these dates are off a little bit, so I will make sure this gets updated. But you have to take that by the end of this month. Okay, by the end of November is what we're looking at there. And so you'll want to take that exam by the end of November, and you have to pass with a score of 90%. Okay, if you don't get 90% on your first time, that's okay. You can take it again. You just have to wait 24 hours while it resets, and then you take it again. Now, in the past, these have been proctored where you've had to like take it with your advisor, chilling there in the room with you or something. Because we're all socially distanced, it's not necessarily as equitable for us to be able to do that. So your advisor will set you up with the code, and then it's your job to take the exam And we just trust that you don't do it with the knowledge exam, the knowledge study guide sitting right next to you. Like, we're just telling you of like, hey, don't use the guide, actually try to know your stuff, because that's what leaders do. And so take it without using your notes in the guide and try to keep it closed book at home. And we're just trying to trust you on your honor that you will do that. So if it comes out that like later on we learn like, oh, so-and-so, they've cheated on the knowledge exam, like we'll handle that with you because we couldn't even trust you with that, right, later. And so just take that as for what it's worth, study from the knowledge guide, from that study guide, and then you'll be able to confidently take it. And I promise you, you can do it. Okay, it's not meant to be that intense. It's meant to help make sure that you know enough about DECA, and that's obviously important for a state officer. Okay, so that's that knowledge exam piece. Again, all you got to do is tell your advisor, hey, email coach@californiadeca.org that we're ready to take the knowledge exam. They'll send it in. We'll send them the information, and then you take it from there. Okay, so that shouldn't be too hard. Should be able to definitely be able to make that happen before the end of the month. Okay. Then you have this advisor nomination. That's that notification form that I was talking about that can be found here. And so you can see that one right here. That piece is again, kind of your school giving the thumbs up saying like, yes, this person is awesome and we want them to be a state officer. We're like, okay, great. So that's a key piece that's got to happen as well. And we'll talk about dates as we get a little bit further. Then we will have all officer candidates submit a commercial video. Okay, so that's a pre-recorded 30-second commercial that just highlights you. You can read more about that, regardless of if state conference is virtual or whatever can happen like that. All candidates will still do a commercial, so you can keep that in mind. There's some instructions on how to upload that, just to make sure that that I get it and get it by the due date. So make sure you follow all of those instructions. And then there will be, after you are approved as a candidate, there will be a candidate online briefing video. Okay. And what that was, it'll be a call like this, but at that point, it will be all focused on here's exactly how the process is going to go, and like we'll walk you through each step by step. So that's why, like I said at the beginning, I don't have like all the answers of how exactly it's going to look, because we're still waiting on some things of like, is it going to be virtual? What parts will be in person, et cetera. And so I'll give you that as soon as I can with that piece. Okay. So that is something to make sure you look at. Then you have a portfolio. Okay. These are for the appointed positions. They are required. And this year, I'm 90% sure this is going to be a digital only portfolio, meaning you're not going to have to worry about it being printed or like mailing us a binder if it's all virtual or anything like that. It'll be, you'll send us a PDF. It'll be like, here's my portfolio, check it out. And what it should be is just a recap of all the cool things that you've done, right? That you feel like gives you experience to be the vice president of marketing or the vice president of leadership or the other positions. You're welcome to do one if you're not going for one of these appointed positions. But if you are for the marketing or leadership positions, you have to have a portfolio. And there's a lot of information about what those are. Feel free to ask our state officer team about what they put in theirs, and we can be able to help answer that. Okay. So those are the steps. And I want to get to the actual application part as well. Like I said, there are going to be campaign rules, but we'll save that because some things could change, in that way. So don't worry too much. First, make sure you got the application taken care of and your CTE requirement all set. And then we will dive into whatever those next steps are for the exact election process. Okay, so down here, you can see the specific dates for the positions. And the reason I have to specifically call this out is because the dates are a little different depending on what position you're applying for. Okay, so district vice presidents, here's your dates. Okay, so make sure you check that out. It's on page 12 of the candidate guide. All right, and then there's a little bit of specifics there. And then we get to the next one in terms of the state president. Okay, and then here's the dates for the state president role. And then there's going to be the specifics. If you're going to be a candidate for a state president, here's some pieces. And again, we will go through all of this in super detail at the candidate briefing once you're approved as a candidate. But first, you got to focus on those dates. And then last, here's the dates for those appointed positions. Again, so there's just a little bit of tweaks based on the district vice president positions and these appointed positions and the state president. So you just want to make sure you're mindful of those based on whatever position you're going to be running for. Okay. Last but not least, there are some forms. Okay. And so here's kind of that checklist at the end that says, all right, like here's, check these things off as you make sure that they get done. and then these forms get uploaded. So yes, you may have to exchange some emails with your advisor to get things digitally signed and getting signatures that way. Digital sometimes can take a couple of days extra. So do not procrastinate these things, okay? Do not procrastinate when it comes to those application pieces of getting things signed by your, your school administrators and that kind of thing, because we don't want that to catch you in a bind, okay? So you can see there's the advisor checklist that you need to do. There's a candidate agreement that shows like even just a quick highlight of like, these are the events you're probably going to attend as a state officer. So you got to make sure you commit now you're going to attend all of those events. So you can look at that. There is a cost to be a state officer. California DECA invests way more than this in each state officer, but we do ask that each state officer pay $500 over the course of their term. And basically, after they've been elected before the district conferences, that they have to pay those. Okay, so that's $500, and that's a cost there you can look at. There's some things that you should make sure your parents are in the loop with, just in terms of if we do, get to the point where we can travel again and be able to do that piece. There's some guidelines and things that we just make sure you're all safe and taken care of. So there's a lot of signatures that you got to get. Again, if we got to do that digitally, just make sure you give yourself time to be able to make that happen. And then just some forms that you fill out, and you upload all of this in the application. Okay. And so you can see that here, there's a candidate application form and the signature pages, and that's where all of that information will go, just so you can make sure that you have everything covered. Okay. And so the application, it's pretty simple in terms of just going step by step of like, here's what I know I gotta get filled out. Take a look at those so you can get, especially if it requires the administrator signatures at your schools, try to get a jump start on that, just so you have time to get those back from them and be able to make sure you have everything you need. Okay. So that is kind of my overview. I wanted to go over all of those simple pieces there. Excuse me. But in terms of the application process and in that area, if there's any questions, feel free to type those into the chat. But then from our officer team, are there any pieces of advice that you would give as they are trying to collect all this information and filling out the application, taking the knowledge exam, any tips or strategies that you'd like to share as if there's any questions that come in the chat? Now would be the time if you have any advice for this group.
I have one tip about the knowledge test. So I think how it works is that you can take it as many times as you want, correct?
Yes, that's true.
So basically, you don't have to worry about failing or anything, because if you do fail like the first time, you can just take it another time. So like Scott mentioned earlier, I'd recommend just take it with integrity. Don't cheat. Make sure you know this stuff, because people are going to keep asking you about this. You'll need to know about DECA even after you finish taking the test, because you'll have your whole tenure as a state officer and you'll need to know about DECA. And I'd suggest the best way to study for that test is to just write down anything you don't know, like handwrite it, because well, it depends on your learning style, but for me, that's how I like to memorize things. So just like write it down a few days before and just make sure you know the stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Gavin. Appreciate that. And I see a good question from Tiffany in the chat here. And so let me answer that to the best of my abilities. Okay. So the expenditure form is a part of this application process. And what it would mean is, hey, if we're in person, you're campaigning for your position, what will you spend money on? Okay. And so there are some guidelines in terms of how much you can spend for your campaign and your campaign booth and so on. And so there are some specifics there that are listed. There is a $250 spending limit, but I don't know exactly yet, like as of this moment, what state conference will look like, and even the district conferences in terms of campaigning. And so what I would encourage you to do as you're filling that out, take a look and say, you can fill that out in terms of like, well, if it was normal, like if it was like last year and we were campaigning, here's what I would spend money on. And that's all it needs to be. It's just a projection. Like I would spend this much on candy. I would spend this much on, my poster board and that kind of thing. And this is just kind of the feel of what I would spend. And so you could fill that out for the just in case kind of thing of like, this is what I would have done. But that's a piece that we can look at. Now, at the end of this month, I have another one of these candidate information meetings scheduled. And it's in that packet when the date is for that. I believe it's on the 20th, I think. But I will try to hopefully have some information more at that point. And then after that meeting, the state officer team and I will try to disseminate that information so they can get out there about what the election process will look like. But I can't guarantee that I'll have all those answers at that point. So for now, all of you, until you hear more clarifying information from me, fill that form out as if you were going to be in-person campaigning. Don't spend any of that money yet, right? Because it might change, but just so you could show this is what I would do. And then you can still check that box of having filled that out on time and submitting it as part of the application. So that's what we'll look at for now. And I know that's not super clear, but we got to deal with changing circumstances and that kind of thing. So thank you. Good question. Anything else from our state officer team? Any other pieces of advice or things that we can add? And if you still have more questions, throw that into the chat there. But anything else from our officers?
Yeah, one thing I'd suggest is to like not procrastinate, because there's like a lot of different forms, different details you need to cover throughout the entire campaigning process. So specifically with, for example, like running for district VPs, a lot of deadlines are coming up. And so I'd recommend just start taking the time to like reflect on your own DECA experience. Think about what you want to cover in your video. Think about what you want to cover in your speech. Think about how you want to like get your message out and what you want to base your campaign on. So yeah, definitely just take the time to start thinking of that now.
Very cool. Super well said, Tyler. Thank you.
On the topic of the knowledge test, I know if you're running for the VP of Marketing, VP of Leadership, or President, a lot of your forms aren't due for like a few more months. They're not due when the district ones are. So you might just like, think, oh, this isn't due for a while. I can just wait. But again, the knowledge test and some other things are kind of due by the end of the month. So that can kind of creep up on you. So just say, if you're thinking about running for one of those positions or any position in general, just don't forget about the knowledge test. Remember it, because it can creep up on you and you can forget about it.
Awesome point, Jake. Thank you. Yes, the state president and the appointed positions, they're not for a while, like those due dates and things. And so don't let this slip by you, because the knowledge test can only be taken this month. So good thing to highlight. Appreciate that. And on that note of the knowledge test, when it comes to like validating scores and that kind of thing, that's something that the candidates, when we put out approved candidates, it's kind of like, yes, they passed the knowledge exam. If there were any opportunity for like discrepancy of like, well, like, are we sure that they passed and we have to like publicly show your percentage, then we would. But it would only be if we knew that you passed, meaning you got over 90%. And we wouldn't show like how many times you took it and like what those first scores were, right? So like if you took it one time and like totally bombed it and then worked your way up to getting 90%, we wouldn't show all of that, where it's like Amory took it 12 times, and the first time she got 1% right and finally got to 94%, right? Like we're not going to do that. But if there's a validation thing where it's like, hey, here's their score, like we promised that they passed, we would do that, but not the full history. So just so we're all clear on that piece. But good, we've had some good questions. We've had some good pieces of advice from the state officers. And so let me just close with this. And that is that each position is a leadership position. I mentioned California DECA invests a lot. Each officer is enrolled in what's called the 100X Officer Program. And this is something that's a leadership development program for state officers, for organizations like DECA and even other CTSOs. And as a member of the state officer team, you're also open to an opportunity to be able to gain a lot of additional hours of leadership training, of regular workshops and so on, both virtually and in person. And then you're able to access a network of other state officers from across the country in DECA and other CTSOs. And there's some really cool collaborations that can happen there as well. And so that's an exciting piece that also happens for a state officer team. And so in conclusion, okay, make sure you focus on that knowledge test and make sure you focus on getting those dates. Get a head start on getting your administrators to sign anything that needs to get signed so that you don't have to worry about that come crunch time. Okay, and if you have questions, please reach out. Please reach out to me, coach@californiadeca.org. I'll type that into the chat, or any of the state officers, and we are here to help. Okay, keep your advisor clued in because we expect that they are a part of this, that they're a part of this process. So we don't want anything to catch them off guard. We don't want anything to catch you off guard either. So let's just keep communicating and we'll make good things happen. All right. So good luck to all of you. Thank you for spending some time with me this evening. I appreciate it. Your state officers appreciate it. Good luck. Have a great rest of your evening. And we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you so much, everyone.